Okay, so in this tutorial I will show you how to use Unity Physics 2D in more depth. So this time we will do a few interactive things. So I will just create 2D sprite, square. So this will be my platform. I can rename it platform. Give it appropriate color, something like that. And then, so because I want, objects to drop on top of it, to like interact with it, I will need to give it a box collider 2D like this. So we're working with 2D physics, so make sure your colliders are 2D. And then I will just make a little environment for testing, very, very basic. So we'll make a bit of this, a bit of that, and maybe a little like platform here. Okay, something like that. So these are my 3 platforms. They all have box colliders, so objects can interact with them. So now I will make kind of like a simple player. I'll just place it here. Player. So I will need again, box collider 2D. Then I will need to add rigid body 2D. So it has some physics, and I will also just change its color so it looks like a player like that, maybe. Okay, so I just press play to compile the project. Okay, so our player is physical. You can see it's moving, but right now, in game I don't have any control over it. It just kind of exists, right? So I think at first let's just move it left and right. So let's just drop it here. So I'll add a script. So there are 2 ways of adding a script. You can either type out your new behavior name, your script name here, and it will appear, or you can create it in, I think, more traditional way. Just right click, create C# script, player movement. Okay, so here make sure that it's capitalized and you don't use any spaces, not at the beginning, not in the middle, not at the end. And then if you press enter, you should create a script. So player movement, it's called player movement, and I will simply just add that behavior to my player. Hold on, what's going on? Let's see what happens here. I think I already had created this name of a class and then I deleted it, and maybe Visual Studio needs to recompile the project to make sure that the script actually exists. Yeah, so see, I already had that name before. So this might be a little confusing, but if you're starting project from start, this is not going to happen to you. So let's see, it's recompiling script assemblies. Okay, let's try to open it. Okay, so this seems to be available. Now I'll click on my player and I'll try to add my movement. Here we go. Okay, so this is working now. I will just double click and open my Visual Studio. So I think we will just need update for now. So I will add so we want to move our object physically, right? So we want to move it using rigid body. And I'll try to show you the difference, okay? So for example, let me just create the float x input. So this is going to be my x input, and my x input is input dot get axis. So it's a horizontal, capitalized. Okay, so this is good. I think I'll just show you like what this variable does here. So right now I'm just making that variable public x input, and just pay attention to what's happening here. So I'll press play. Okay, and I'm going to press A. So it can be A or left. and you can see my input will change to -1. And then if I press D, or I can also press right on my keyboard, my input will change to 1, and if I'm not pressing anything, it's just staying at 0. So you can see left, right. So this is useful because I can use these values for movement. So now I just need to pass that into my movement. So for example, velocity. So next thing I will need to do, I would need to access my rigid body 2D and change my object's velocity. So let me do that. So get component rigid body 2D dot velocity. So this is how you access velocity, is new vector 2, and it's already suggesting to put x input, and for my velocity, so for my y input I'm just putting 0 for now. This is not entirely correct and I will explain why, but let's just see what happens here. Like there are a few things that needs to be fixed, but it's okay for now. So now if I press play, okay, so now I'm pressing right, and now I'm pressing left, and you can see object is moving really slowly, but also it's kind of like floating. Like you can see when I'm moving it, it's not really falling down. This is because we are continuously setting our y velocity, so like up and down velocity, to 0. So even though object is trying to fall down and increase its velocity, it's always getting reset to 0. So that's why it looks like it's kind of like slowly falling down. So instead of doing that, we can just pass its y velocity as is. Like, so we can just take this, so get component rigid body velocity, and we can just pass dot y value. So that's its natural value as is, without any changes. So we're only changing x input. So let's try that, see how that looks. Okay, so you can see this time it fell down in a quicker way, right? And if I press left and right, it will move, just for now really slowly, because I'm increasing it by my x velocity by 1 and -1. So we could, increase that. So before I do that, I just need to make sure that, I'm using my physics component properly, because this is in update and I'm using physics. I need to make sure that I either move this bit into fixed update, so like void fixed update, so I can move that whole thing here, and that way I will have like a correct simulation. So basically including delta time, right? So I could just do that, and maybe I will need to add a float speed to have some control over the speed. Maybe I could make it public. So public, oops, that's not how you spell public. Public float speed, and I'll just multiply my x input by my speed. So yeah, everything is correct now. So we're getting input on update, and then we are adding physics on fixed update. So this is good. So I'll press play. Okay, now yeah, when I press left and right, you can see it's moving, and yeah, I will bounce into the walls. Also, the player object will slide off like this. So a good thing to do is when you kind of trying to maybe build a platformer, is to remember this little where is it? In rigid body 2D we have our constraints, and you can freeze your rotation. So this time around, if I'll press play and I'll move like left and right of the edge of the object, I'm no longer going to like start rotating and fall off. So you can see it's like I can actually stand on the edge, and I'm not going to rotate until, well, I'm not going to rotate at all. But if this was not enabled, then my object will rotate and fall down. So this entirely depends on your game that you're making, but I think for this example I'll keep it like this. Yeah, okay, so now we know how to move object left and right. You can see it's yeah, that's pretty good. So now let's make it jump, and I'm going to use a different function for that. So I will do, so let's say if I press spacebar, then I will be able to jump. So if input dot get key down, so only when I press the key down, and I will get key code dot space, so this is a spacebar. So I will want to so move my object upwards, right? So again, we can just get component rigid body 2D, and this time instead of changing velocity, I will use slightly different function. I will add force. So we have like few extensions here, so you can press up and down to choose which one you want to use. I just want to use vector up, so vector 2.up, and for now I'll just hard code it. I'll just multiply it by 100 and see what happens. So when I press space, I should add 100 force of 100 on one single frame when I just press that. So let me try that. Okay, so you can see I can kind of spam space if I want to, but right now my jump is a bit weak. So I could make that into a public variable as well. So public float jump force, and let's do 200 by default, and I will take that here and I'll place it here. So now we're able to pass this value in here, and we can change it. So okay, so by default is 200, and let's press play. Okay, 200, let's try 400. Okay, so this is much higher. So a good thing to do is, if you want your players to be much more responsive, because I would say right now it's really floaty, what you can do is increase its mass. So I'll just make it into 4, and you can see it will kind of fall down quicker. But what that means, you would have to compensate it here, so you would have to increase your jump force. So maybe like this, maybe a bit more. So I'm making it heavier, so basically falls down quicker, and then I would increase my jump force. Maybe something like that, maybe a bit less. Let's do force, so mass 3, and maybe jump force 400. Let's try that. Okay, 400 is not enough. 1000. Okay, 1000 is good. So I'll press play, set my variable to 1000, and this is a kind of good enough jump, for the demonstration's sake. Okay, so I can move around. You can see if I'll jump upwards, I will get blocked by that platform. So this is a good way of testing it. So next thing, I think I will add kind of a few floating objects, so they just kind of getting in the way, just a few crates basically. So box 2D, give it a rigid body 2D, and I'll call that a box, and I will make a few of them. So Control D, Control D, Control D. Okay, so now I'll press play. Yeah, and you can see I can jump on them, I can move them, I can also launch myself using the force. I could force them to jump. Yeah, so this is working pretty well. Okay, so yeah, so when you're using you know, if you want to have like a movable character and you want to move it using physics, make sure you use these functions. Let me show you what not to do. So for example, like right now I'm, you know, using fixed update and I'm using rigid body velocity to move my player, right? Let me show you what happens if instead of this I just simply changed position of my object. So basically, in other words, like if I wasn't using physics. So let's do transform.translate. So this will allow me to move my object, you know, up, down, left, right. So I want to move it on X input. So X input and 0, 0. Okay, so this is just a very basic, you know, you can move objects like that, but without physics. It's a very similar thing to when you move object with, you know, transform dot position. It's kind of like same thing, but this is, you know, how much objects should be moving on each frame. So yeah, so we're not using physics anymore. We're just using this, and I'll show you why this is going to be broken. Right, so first I'm just passing by through the objects. So another thing, my speed is a bit ridiculous right now. So let me just decrease that. So I will divide my speed by, I don't know, like maybe 50, because it just looks like a bit too fast. Maybe 20. So I wanted to slow down so to show you like what's wrong with this, you know, usage. Okay, so on surface everything looks okay here, but you can see if I'm moving, I'm just sort of glitching into the objects, and then Unity Physics is trying to kind of like save that and try to move me away, because you know, I think even if I press like long enough, I'll be able to pass through this object. This is because I'm just moving object's position regardless of its physicality and how it should respond to physics, and you should not do that. You should avoid it, because you know, this is not a good physical interaction. And then also on top of that, you will get this kind of like glitchiness. You will start glitching through the walls. So yeah, if you're using, you know, box colliders, rigid bodies, do not use transform.translate or, you know, transform.position and, you know, change your position. Don't do that at all. Instead, use fixed update, access your rigid body and just change velocity. Or, you know, if you want to like add force immediately, you could use add force function, and then you choose your vector, whether it's up or right, you know, whatever vector you want to choose, and then apply velocity in that direction. So let me just show you how it works, you know, properly. Right, so you can see I'm moving objects, but I'm not fading through them. You know, they are still physical. I can't move them too much. Okay, so this is a very simple example of a platformer. So another thing that I would like to do is let's do something very similar. So I will keep my platforms. I will delete my player and my boxes. And let's say I want to make a top-down game where, you know, I'm just moving around in like little rooms, and I have to. So I'll just make a little. Yeah, I'll just make a little box like that. I'll make a player. So again, I'll make. Let's make him kind of like purple, magenta kind of color. So player, and I will add a rigid body, and then I will add a box collider. So you can add Box Collider and Rigid Body like, you know, in your preferred order. You can even swap them later on if you want. This is absolutely fine. So this is my player. So all of that is fine. I think same as before, I want to freeze rotation so the object is not getting rotated. And another thing, so I just want it to be like a top-down game, right? So where I move up, down, left, right with my keys, and I can move like that. So for that reason, I will need to turn off physics because I don't want to be affected by gravity. So I'll just turn off my gravity scale to 0, like this, and I'll add another script. So here, so last time I created my script using you know, this method. So this time I'll show you how to add a script using add component method. So you can basically type in the script that you want to create without so basically you have to make sure that the script doesn't exist yet, because for example, if I started typing in player movement, you know, it will suggest to create that. But I will do something like player top down, so you can see it. So this does not exist anymore. So then I click new script. So, you know, is that what I want to call it? Yes. Player top down, create. So what's going to happen is it will immediately add that script here, and it will also add it into my project. So if you prefer this method, it's, you know, a little bit of a shortcut. You can just type in the name of the script and it will generate it for you, and it will add it to the project. So now I'm going to open it. So this is my script, and I just want to move my object, you know, up, down, left, and right. So I will need float x input and also float y input, and then I will need to collect, so store the input. So x input is input dot get axis, so that would be horizontal. Horizontal, did I type it right? So when you type in strings, make sure you type in the correct keywords, because, you know, you can do like a little mistake like that and you would know what's wrong. So okay, so x input looks correct for now. We can test it in a bit, and then I'll do my y input, which is y input dot get axis vertical. Yep, that's a mistake. So horizontal and vertical. Okay, so that looks correct. You know, just in case you're not sure if the input is working, you can always make it public. Oops, you can make public at first. Public like that. And so I should be able to see my variables here when I press. So left, right, up and down. Is it not changing? Hold on. Oh, I didn't press play. Okay. Left, right, that's working. Up and down. Okay, so I'm getting values coming in. Left, right, up and down. And I can press them at the same time as well. Okay. So this is good. Now I'm just gonna add that. So void fixed update. So get component. So we're working with rigid body 2D, and I'm gonna add sorry, not add force, change velocity. So it's a new vector 2, and this time I'm just going to pass in my x input here and my y input here, like that. So again, same as before, I might probably need to add like a speed variable, but for now let's just see if it works. So press play. Okay, so it is working. I can move my object like this. It's a bit slow, but so another thing, once your variables are working and, you know, you can see the input, like for example this is input, and, you know, I don't really want to change it, I just need to know that it works, then you could always just make it private. so it doesn't get on the way. So this is fine. And then I'll add float, speed, let's make it 10. And I will just, so I can either multiply it here or here, this is entirely up to you. Since I'm doing my setup here, you know, like I'm gathering my input data here and I'm multiplying it by speed, it just kind of makes sense to me to put it here and then add it into my velocity. So I'll save that, and I'll press play. Okay, so you can see I'm moving, and you know that this room is, you know, somewhat physical. You know, I could even kind of like make more walls and stuff like that. And maybe some like crates. So these could be my crates. So again, make sure you add a box collider and a rigid body. And you know, if you're making a top-down game, then you probably want to turn off or set your gravity scale to 0. So I'll add a few crates here, maybe one crate here, and let's just see how they interact. Okay, so you can see, yeah, I can move these objects. I made a really tight entrance. I can move these objects as well. So same thing as before. If you want to, you could turn off rotation on these objects. So I could select them and freeze my rotation. So what will happen now is, like, yes, I can move them, you know, up, down, and diagonally, but the objects won't rotate unless you want that to be a feature in your game. So let's just see. See, now it's different. Now it's like this. So if they're bouncing off, you know, you might to work on your so angular drag, oh sorry, a linear drag right here. So if I set this to like 10, so the objects will be like, I will still be able to move them, but they will be less responsive. They're not just gonna keep on flying in that direction. So you can see when I move them, they just kind of stay there. So if that's something that you want in your game, just, you know, make sure you select that option. Right, okay, so yeah, so that was like a simple introduction to a movement of the rigid body. You know, I hope you practice and make like a little room like this.